in addition to those kids who came forward with bad food and made the school board eat it, that my film makes it look like that's the whole reason that the school system began the process of change and hired Tony. But there was another reason that we didn't put in the film because it was too abstract and we filmed a lot about it, and that is that, there we go, that there's a person who did a study years before those kids did that. There's a person who initiated the study, and she's here tonight, Jill Wrigley. I'm traveling all over the country with this film, and this is a unique opportunity because everybody in the room is sort of attached to this community and lots of people here. So I just want to acknowledge Jill, who's married to Michael Sarbanes, who works with the city school system. It's all one happy little community here. Anyway, Jill did an ABLE Foundation, I may get some of the facts wrong, pardon me, but she did a longitudinal study about, food and school food in America. She did this huge research thing funded by the foundation, and she, published it and put it forth on the desk of Alonzo. And it was a huge directory of possibilities. And it had Tony on page, 402 as this guy in Connecticut who had just done this kind of amazing thing in some county, or New Hampshire, sorry. And so she was integral in making this thing happen. So I just wanted to say, because she's here, especially acknowledge that. And we also interviewed, how documentary films have a huge shooting ratio. We interviewed Jill for 2 hours. We interviewed lots of people for hours and hours. And then we sort of just cherry-picked the minimum amount of interview bites that would tell our story, because we wanted to have mainly kids on the screen. And Tony is a character that drives the story. So I'm always apologizing to Jill and other people who we interviewed and then didn't end up in the film and stuff. But this is an incredibly complex topic, and at one point we had an 89-minute version of the film, and it still was short of telling the whole story. There's no way to tell the whole story. The other person I want to acknowledge, so now this film got finished like last May, and a lot's happened in Baltimore. Lots of things are moving forward. So that's usually a question people ask, what's happening now that Tony left? So, the way I like to do it is a simple mathematical thing. Tony tried to do 20 things. He tried to get like 20 things off the ground. 15 of those things got off the ground and are running full speed forward. The farm is unbelievable, which is out in Catonsville, and it's even more beautiful and amazing than it looks in the film. And then, out of those 20 things, 5 of those things are still sort of like caught up in bureaucracy. The central kitchen, for instance, is still being met about and talked about. I think it will happen, but it's just going to take several years. And the other wonderful person in the room tonight, who I just met today, is Rod Womack, who took over Tony's job in the city of Baltimore. Could you stand up for a second? You're a Baltimore guy, right? And you were already working here, or you came in from outside?
Well, lived here for a while.
Yeah, so
I'm a Maryland guy.
Right, so Maryland guy. So Tony now, Tony moved on to Memphis. He's now the head of school nutrition in Memphis City and county combined, which is even larger. And they already have a central kitchen, and you just got to visit Tony down in Memphis a couple weeks ago, which is cool. So there's this sort of passing of a baton to this new guy, and he has huge shoes to fill, but he's been all Tony-fied now. He's just spent some time with Tony, and nobody can be like that. That's the thing. When I met this guy, I realized that he has the supernatural evangelical spirit. He can't really complete any task. He's highly flawed. But Tony's an idea person, a visionary, and he gets people to do things. He himself cannot sort of like be responsible to do the whole thing. And he knows that. He talks about it all the time. Another problem in our society is that we don't know what to do with those people. We stick them in churches and stuff, and they preach. But Tony's like this amazing guy, and I really like him. And the other thing the film doesn't contain is it doesn't contain Tony's backstory. We had that in, and it was too cumbersome and distracting, so we took it out. Tony is from New Orleans. He's Sicilian-American. His father was in the mafia and owned a nightclub in New Orleans. He grew up upstairs from the nightclub. He worked in the back of the kitchen. He was a juvenile delinquent. He was almost arrested several times. He was arrested finally, and a judge, instead of putting him in jail, said, "You join the military and I'll let you go." And he joined like the army, he went to Frankfurt. He was a total like screw up in the military. And he came back and just started working in kitchens. Then he went to California, and he ended up getting a GED, which is his highest degree. And then he started working in a wine bar in San Francisco. Then he fell in love with some woman, went to New Hampshire, raised 3 children who are now grown and out in the world. Marriage fell apart, and then he's remarried, and he lives in New Hampshire and in Memphis. He has a house in both places. But the guy's really interesting because, talk about interdisciplinary, the guy's just sort of self-taught maniac. And he has a brother. Tony has a brother. I love this fact. I wish I could have put it in the film. Tony's brother, 2 years older or younger, I forget, is an evangelist preacher in Colorado. Has a huge mega church. They barely speak to each other, but the point is that the DNA is transferable. So if you find yourself with some DNA like that, just know that there's other uses for it. So now I'm going to open up to questions. I really like questions. Questions don't have to have answers. Sometimes I think they're the most where truth lies in the world is in questions often and not in answers, but I really want to hear what you're thinking. And you can ask me anything at all. Yes, in the back.
I wanted to come to because we're talking really personal to me. My son goes to school in Baltimore County, and I don't think the lunches are as bad as what I saw in Baltimore City. But on the menus, we get monthly menus that are sent home. They always say it's fresh fruit or fresh bread products or salads or things. So I popped into the cafeteria and it's never there.
Right.
And so I guess my question is, because you worked on the film, do you know what my first step would be in order to find out who I even go to or where do I even start to find out how change can be brought in to Baltimore County?
Right. Well, I think that you're a parent of a kid who's in a particular school. So the first place to start is to start talking to other parents at that school.
Right, and I think you've done that.
Yeah.
Parents, talking to other parents who've definitely been disgruntled and
right.
The lunch
okay.
is horrible.
Yeah, and it's a common story. I don't mean to belittle it, but it's so common. There's not like an exact trajectory that I'm recommending to you, but the first thing is to solidify a group of you. It can be 3, 5, 10, doesn't have to be huge. And then make sure that you can make practical suggestions at the same time you're complaining. Because if you just sort of bitch and come and complain, nobody knows what to do with it. Which is why we made the film we did. It would have been very easy for us to make a film that just sort of says everything's screwed up. Because depends on where you point the camera, we could easily make that film. So I think you have to be a catalyst within your school first. And if you find the school principal or the PTA or whatever isn't listening to you or is giving you some lip service, then come down to North Avenue, and make an appointment, with Rod, or his staff.
She's in the county.
I'm sorry, she's in the county. So there must be a county in Towson. There's probably a Rod in Towson. So I would just start and see if you can do it from the ground up. The reason, this is weird to say, but the reason why I don't think it's good to go too high at first is because you can get lost in sort of, irrelevance and people say it's not my job or whatever. So, but if you also go into the cafeteria at your school and start thinking for yourself, what is this machine over here that's not being used? Oh, that hasn't been used in 10 years, we don't know what to do with it. Oh, well, it's make soup or something, so why don't, what would it cost to plug that in or whatever? Like start making it easier for people to help you and stay positive. I don't know, I wish you good luck. It's hard. Yeah.
Richard,
yes?
Well, my suggestion is that you get some of your other parents together because there's power in numbers. And a posse can get more done than one cowboy. So I definitely you get a dozen people, now all of a sudden that one voice is amplified. So I suggest
right.
But I think like the complaining stage right now. So just
get yourself a posse together.
Another good idea. Yes?
I was wondering how much impact do you think that the film had on a lot of the success of the program or the different programs, as you said, about 15 or so, because there is a difference if you think you're going to be told on it. So if a lot of people know they're being filmed,
yeah.
it gets to the public and spread like a secret.
Yeah, well that's what, what I can tell you is that the filming itself changed stuff in Baltimore. What I can tell you is that right now, this film has become part of like a national zeitgeist. And it's because Michelle Obama, coincidentally, Jamie Oliver, Michael Pollan, all these people, like and Alice Waters in Berkeley, California, all these people have chimed into this giant movement. And it's sort of like pulling back the curtain and seeing the truth. And once you see the truth, you can't unlearn something. So once we say, okay, we know we've been duped for 30 or 40 years with school food. It's been terrible. It's rubber stamped by the government for decades, and all of us as parents thought it was okay. It hasn't been okay. So now it's like time to start working up from the bottom and make change. And so the film, I know, because I've been publicly speaking with it, not at Richard Chisolm festivals like this, but like at film festivals and food festivals. And I've noticed that the film is provoking, you know, with blogs and stuff, and people start talking to each other. I had this one screening up in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. There's about 100 people in an auditorium. This doctor who runs the foundation there hired me to come up and show the film. So I came up and I showed the film, and the whole Q&A was them talking to each other about what to do. And it was people like the parents of a kid, and then there was a guy who owned the grocery store, a guy who owned the warehouse, this guy who had a truck. And it's a rural community, but they all knew each other. And they just like, I was up there just sort of like, you know, gluing together these people who were highly motivated to change. The film sort of, you know, helped them. So I think we also knew, once we started learning about the topic and its complexity, we knew we couldn't make a film for a national audience that would have like a recipe or a formula for how to fix it. That either in the film or with the study guide you could present, here's a checklist of what to do next. It would never work. What works in Bangor, Maine doesn't work in Albuquerque. The climates are different, the people, the ethnography of the food, everything's different. So all we thought we should do is make a film that would inspire the Tony Geraci in us, and also let the kids have empowerment in the film to kind of speak directly to us emotionally, so that we can see in their faces and their little voices what's possible. These are all like real kids saying real things, and to me that's powerful. And so just to have this Baltimore story inspire somebody in, you know, Wisconsin, not by the exact, you know, food or calories or number of people, not by the hoop house or any specific, it's just like the idea of making change with whatever you have. Yes?
Richard, there's a scene in there that I've seen this a couple times, it really intrigues me, that it seems like it's about the challenges of really trying to change the way a system works, like food ordering or whatever. And it's when Melissa Mahoney, I think she's the chief dietitian,
right,
is walking through the office saying, can we do multiple bids? And there's
right,
and everyone's looking at her like with these blank faces like, nope, can't do that. Can you say a little bit more about what's happening in that
Right,
scene?
so we had hours of footage of Melissa walking through those cubicles, hours. And the editor, David, and I were trying to figure out how to symbolize what her day-to-day job is. She's counting apples on the phone. She's trying to figure out why people aren't doing something that they should be doing. She's calling into question stupid bureaucracy and crap that doesn't need to be done so bad. And so we just picked a few scenes and just glued them together to symbolize that it's a ferocious thing, a bureaucracy. And those people are not bad people. Those people in those cubicles are proud of their job, they want to have their job, and they have been there for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and they got a routine down, and when something new comes along, it's not easy for them to like turn a page and say, oh, you want me to work twice as hard now? It's really hard, you know, and she's really respectful. She's really careful with those people. And some of those people, when a new regime came to town, like Tony and Melissa, those people were faced with a fork in the road, a choice. I'm either going to change the way we've been doing stuff for 20 years and listen to these new people and maybe keep my job more secure, or I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight and say, no, you can't do that, that's the way we do it. And what you can see is that there's some threshold there that Melissa's trying to cross, person by person. And believe me, it was every day was another little chip away at this thing. And it's not that Melissa was an expert, but she was always asking, how can we make this better? She's really just got the Tony Geraci spirit going. So does that...
Yeah. Is she still there?
She is still there, I think. She's
Well, not for long.
not for a long time. I think she's
But I wanted to piggyback off what you said. I thought that it was a good point. But in fact, over the process of Melissa and Tony, I think, working within the system, because there's a lot of bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy definitely gets in the way of us doing what we're there to do sometimes, and it's really unfortunate. But that said, the very topic that Melissa was addressing, that is the procurement process and being able to bid it out in multiple ways, has changed. So now that procurement process, it's in like 4 different parts now. It's not all bid one way. So that, in fact, it happened. But Melissa is moving on.
Yeah,
she's moving back forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Other thoughts, other questions, ideas? What do you think? Yes?
Yeah, following up on Stephen's question, perhaps if you continued the next episode, I dare I say this, but is there maybe just an inkling of graft and maybe corruption in some of these food procurement and bidding?
Yeah, absolutely, and
which is part of the systemic problem.
Yeah, and again, when we started making this film, Sheila and I wanted to make a film that would be positive.
Right.
I mean, we've already worked on documentaries about Baltimore and about how horrible everything is. And there's been films about the school system 10 years ago, and that were very negative portrayals. And it would have been easy, frankly, for us to go into the North Avenue building and handpick people that are involved in nepotism, cronyism, corruption, embezzlement. A lot of things have changed. A lot of people have been weeded out. But that's not the film we were making. And it was tempting at times because we got angry. Tony would get angry. It was tempting to just hang somebody because we had interviews and sound bites of people that were just atrocious. They were damaging, legally speaking. But we did not want to do that because if we had done that, it would have been personally dangerous for me. I mean, Tony had death threats at one point, and I knew that if I did a film like that, I live in Baltimore, I'd have to move or something. I mean, there's people that would have been really angry. There's giant food companies that have these giant contracts with these giant school systems, and there's lots of money flowing all around it. And so if you interrupt it and expose it, it's a different movie. It's a different kind of thing. And we also thought that if we did that kind of film, and we showed it to any audiences, that it might be a good film, might get some trophies as a film or something, it might be on HBO or Frontline, but what utility is it? We all just go home after seeing that film and we're like, oh, no hope, it's horrible. So I just think, my more mature vision about what documentaries can do is that they have to, for me at least, they have to have some hook of future positive energy, even if they're a horribly negative topic, because I'm interested in social change. I'm interested in social change much more than I'm interested in food and nutrition. I mean, I care now about food more than I ever did. But that isn't what struck me. That isn't what sucked me into this project. What sucked me into this project was being a Baltimorean and having this feeling of cynicism, and then realizing what's possible, if you have this other spirit. And so it was very educational for me. Yes.
I find it interesting what you just said, that you're more interested in social change than food and nutrition, but if you watch some of those kids, like when they're eating at Woodbury Kitchen, that is social change. I mean, right there, the way the one kid was saying, nobody ever cared what we thought, nobody ever asked us, nobody
Absolutely.
ever took the time to do this with us. And so to me, the most uplifting thing was how food is about that. It's about community, and it's about helping each other. I love that part.
Okay, I'm glad you did, and that's why it's in the film. Because I'm not a big crier, but when I filmed those kids around the table talking about their lives and how they saw the stars for the first time and heard crickets for the first time in their lives, and they're 18 years old, I was just crying. The whole time I was shooting, I was just had tears going down my face. I was going around interviewing these guys, and they're totally honest. And it was heartbreaking. 17 or 18-year-old person who's never had fresh salad or had food before. And there's something really liberating about seeing it happen, but it's also pretty late in the game, for a 17-year-old to say they're 18-year-old. So there's real moving moments, but I appreciate what you said. And I think food, this whole topic is really complex. It's a human rights issue. It's a social justice issue. It has to do with history and race, science, nutrition, brain chemistry, development. It's not just like school food. It's about development of people's lives in our country. It's a huge number of people that are affected by this topic. So you know, it's too complex to make one film about. Is what we always struggled with. So we just sort of like picked things that we thought were symbolic. Yes.
You touch on the topic a little bit a few times throughout the entire movie is about, or the documentary is about the food culture in the schools in Baltimore City. And I'm just curious why, why was there maybe not just at the beginning or the end a pull back and look at Baltimore City and say, this is an issue that's not just in the school system, but is citywide. You have food deserts. You have this whole entire culture of food that is different in this city than it is in lots of different parts of Maryland, and that's why they struggle with this issue. And you do it a few times, like you were just talking about with them talking about this around the table and the circle around the table, saying, well, we don't have grass in Baltimore City, so we can't grow these things. And I'm just curious as to why.
So when you make any film, it's a subjective thing.
Sure.
And if I said, why don't you make a film about UMBC? Think of how daunting that would be, right? You pick certain classes, your favorite professor, your favorite, grass place to sit, and that would be your film, and it would be limited, even if it was 2 hours long. So the first thing is just a physics thing. You're making a film, you can't make it about everything. I did, however, shoot lots of shots, atmosphere shots of bus stops and row houses and slums and wide shots of the city. And I did it. I spent several days doing it. And we put it in the edit and we started looking at it as a way of getting the geography and the sense of the larger city. 200 schools, 83,000 students, shots of streets, shots of, people. And we took it all out. And we took it out as a choice, creative choice, because one thing, it was really depressing. Secondly, it's imagery that I thought that people, because I knew this film was going to be shown outside of Baltimore mainly, which is true. I thought people in Duluth, Minnesota, or Tucson have already seen, if they've seen The Wire, The Corner, Homicide, if they watch the news and they see Detroit, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, slums, North Philadelphia, they know that. So I'm saying, I said to myself and the editor, that's a given. Let's not just reiterate this thing. It's like a cliche. And I really felt bad filming it, and I felt bad when I saw it in the film. It pulled it back. And so I thought, okay, let's just cut to the chase. Just get right into this kids talking about food, touching food, and Tony. And it's a little unusual because it doesn't pull back. And except for the harbor and Tony's boat, you hardly ever see really where you are and stuff. So, but it was just a decision of focus, hard.
This is not the first time I saw the documentary, because I was in
Really?
Steve's class.
Oh, okay.
I've seen it like 4 times, actually.
I'm sorry.
And I wrote a paper on this, actually, for his class. And
What do you give me grade-wise?
I did well. And the reason why I asked is because in my paper, one of the angles I took was one of the biggest issues that Tony faced was the food culture in Baltimore City, and that people just don't have a basis for good nutrition, and they don't really even understand how to cook good meals because they don't have access to this food.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And it's true in many cities. Baltimore is just like, one of dozens of cities of the same size that have the exact same problems. Yes, Patricia.
So what did Tony say about the film?
Tony loves the film. I get on a plane tomorrow at 6 in the morning and go to the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival in Montana and meet Tony there, and we show the film tomorrow night, and we do a thing where we talk sometimes when we're together after the film, make fun of each other. We're exactly the same age.
We should film YouTube.
Yeah, people have. Anyway, we're the same age, and we have the same kind of delinquent spirit about making social change. I mean, Tony uses all kinds of great metaphors. He says, when you see something that needs to be fixed and nobody's listening to you, get off the bus, get off the train, and lie down in front of the tracks. he has like a complete reckless abandon with facts. But it's all in a good place in his heart, He'll get up in front, if he feels like he can get up and say, 2 out of 3, blah, 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 he just makes it up. It's loosely based on something he read or somebody told him. And I do the same thing occasionally. And if it's in context and you understand how he is, it's wonderful, but he gets in trouble. Then when he gets in trouble, he says, I'm sure it's my mistake. I'm a total bullshitter, I'm really sorry. So he's into like recklessly trying to change things by rhetoric and by futuristic thinking, and then have other people, like data-driven people, come back to him and say, Tony, actually that's not exactly true. And he's like, I'm sorry. Next. He understands the game he's playing. And we used to tease him that if you met Tony Geraci at a party and you said, Tony, I like what you're doing, and I might be able to help you one day. My uncle owns a big truck and he doesn't use it anymore. And Tony will say to you, oh, that's great, that's great. You know, I would like to talk to you about that truck. You know, it's an 18-wheeler. You might be willing to donate it, your uncle? Well, I have to talk to my uncle, and you know, he might be interested. I think he might. That's great, man. Nice to meet you. The next day, I've been in Tony's office where he picks up the phone and he calls somebody, school board member,